afternoon and welcome. It's midday. I hope you had a good Easter weekend if you were celebrating that holiday this weekend, and thanks for being with us today. Yesterday, according to a statement from Governor Wes Moore's office, workers removed a 200-ton segment of one of the spans of the collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge, and they transported it to a holding area at Trade Point Atlantic in Sparrows Point. You'll remember that Trade Point is located south of the bridge, out of the danger zone for shipping channels there. And as soon as enough debris is removed from the crash site, and it's safe to do so, divers will resume their search for the bodies of 4 workers who are presumed to be submerged in the wreckage. I'm Tom Hall. My first guest today is U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. On Thursday, the Secretary announced that Maryland will receive $60 million of federal emergency relief funds as a first tranche of support in the recovery and rebuilding process of the bridge. Mr. Secretary, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
So you made an interesting point last week when you were here in town with Governor Moore and other officials. You said that, when there's an airline disaster, there's one agency, the FAA, that overlooks that kind of event. But for maritime disasters, it's different. It's not just one. It's a whole roster of different agencies, the Coast Guard, the Transportation Department, et cetera, et cetera. Who is coordinating the federal effort in this particular case?
Well, the response in terms of opening the channel is in a unified command led by the Coast Guard. But as you mentioned, a lot of players there, to include the Army Corps of Engineers, state of Maryland, were involved as well. And then when it comes to the reconstruction and the reopening of the port, that's with the state of Maryland. But of course, we're doing everything we can with all of the different federal agencies that come into play to help support that. For example, we've got, as you mentioned, $60 million headed in as something of a down payment. We expect there will be much more where that came from. That's federal dollars, but they're going through state machinery because it is the Maryland DOT that has the lead on maintaining and ultimately replacing a resource and asset like the Key Bridge. I think many people would be surprised to learn how many different players are involved in all of our forms of transportation in the U.S. And so the real key has been coordination and collaboration. And I've been inspired by the coordination and collaboration that's gone on with the state under leadership of Governor Moore, as well as the city and the county, whose agencies have an important role. And at President Biden's direction, every part of the federal government, from our U.S. Department of Transportation to the Coast Guard, Army Corps of Engineers, even the Navy, the Department of Labor, as the acting labor secretary, heads to Baltimore today to engage some of the workers who are impacted, and so many more, all pulling together to support Maryland, support Baltimore, and help get back to normal.
Given the fact that there's no vessel traffic allowed in and out of the Port of Baltimore, supply chain disruptions are a concern on the part of a lot of folks. You convened a meeting last Thursday of people who run ports around the country, labor people, industry folks, and there's also a special task force to deal with supply chain interruptions. Can you give us a status of those conversations?
That's right. We built a number of different tools in the wake of the supply chain disruptions we saw due to COVID back in 2021. And we've been putting those tools to work in this situation. We, of course, did not know we'd be confronted with something like the bridge collapsing and making the Port of Baltimore unavailable. But we knew that we would face something, more challenges to come. And so President Biden's infrastructure law created a new multimodal freight office and new tools at our department to help coordinate among the different players. It's been useful as we face disruptions in the Panama Canal, disruptions in the Red Sea due to Houthi activity. And now we're putting those new systems to work dealing with these disruptions. As you mentioned, I was able to engage with players including port owners, terminal operators, shippers, even the trucking and rail industries, because all of them are affected when you have something as significant as the Port of Baltimore going offline. The good news is we've seen a lot of different players up and down the East Coast able to step up and temporarily absorb the traffic that would have been coming in and out of Baltimore. But it really is challenging, especially in more specialized areas like vehicles. Baltimore is America's #1 vehicle handling port, not just for things like auto imports, but things like high-end heavy tractors that are a very important export for the American economy. And so getting through that requires a lot of different players talking, coordinating. Often these are players who are in the habit of competing, but they have agreed to come together collaboratively to get through this situation.
I know we got to let you go, but I wonder if I could ask one final question, and that is your response to Republicans who are saying that federal support is not appropriate in this particular instance. The president has assured Maryland that the federal government will pick up the tab for rebuilding the Key Bridge, and it's met with some resistance from members of Congress. How do you respond to that?
We have heard some of those voices, but I consider that to be a fringe view right now. Generally, when you have a disaster, especially one affecting America's infrastructure, you see bipartisan readiness to come together and do something about it. That's definitely been our history and our pattern as a country. Situations like the Minnesota bridge collapse, where almost right away Congress acted to make sure there was funding to fix it. And my message to any member of Congress who is hesitating is, look, your district could be next. That's why, regardless of politics, regardless of geography, when one part of America is hurting, all of America steps up to help.
Pete Buttigieg is the U.S. Secretary of Transportation. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you, and we will. Appreciate it.